Hello everyone, welcome to Best Recipes with Sharon. Today's recipe starts off pretty simple and pretty straightforward. It's with a basic sugar cookie recipe, and it's turned into a sugar cookie trio with peanut butter chocolate coated, marshmallow chocolate coated, and lemon glazed. So a simple recipe turns into something very extravagant. And before we get started, don't forget to check out my new cookbook. It's available on Amazon, and there's a quick link provided in the description below this video. Okay, so let's get right to making today's recipe. It's always good to measure and pre-pour some of your ingredients ahead of time. And then we'll start by adding 1 cup of butter to a large mixing bowl. Add 3/4 cup of white sugar and 2 egg yolks. And we'll go ahead and mix that together until it's well combined. Pretty straightforward so far, right? The amounts in this sugar cookie recipe are important because you want your base of your cookie to be nice and firm and yet still flaky. Alright, so on to adding 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And finally 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now mix that together once again until it's well combined and it forms a soft dough. And you can see the texture that you need it to be right here. It'll be quite firm. But to make it easier to roll, I do chill it for a little bit in the fridge, maybe 15-20 minutes. Then remove it from the fridge, take your dough out of the bowl, and then I separate it into 2 pieces so that it's easier to roll it out on the parchment paper. So I just take a sharp knife and cut the dough in half. Now when I'm doing cookie dough especially, I like to roll it out between 2 sheets of parchment paper. There's several reasons that I like to do that. It doesn't stick to your rolling pin, you don't have to use as much flour. I always make sure the parchment paper is larger than what you need so that you can pin it against the counter with your body and the dough won't slide around on you. Roll the dough out till it's about 1/4 inch in thickness. I use a round cookie cutter that's about 2 inches. I find that's about the perfect size for these cookies. And once the cookies are cut, you can remove the excess dough from around each cookie. And the parchment paper also aids in making that easier. The dough doesn't stick as badly and it comes off the parchment paper quite easily. Now I put them onto a cookie sheet that's been lined with parchment paper and place them about 2 inches apart. Looking pretty good, and they're now ready to go into the oven. Place them in a 375° Fahrenheit oven on the middle rack for about 7 or 8 minutes. When the cookie's done, they'll be lightly golden underneath, but they shouldn't be browned on top. Now if you're aiming to do the peanut butter or the marshmallow chocolate coated ones, this is the way you would start out with them. But for the lemon glazed ones, you'll need to put a little design in it before you bake them. And I did that simply by using one of my beaters and a toothpick. You might have to use a little flour on the end of the beater so that it doesn't stick to the cookie. And these ones still get baked at 375 degrees for, once again, 7 to 8 minutes. And then the countdown, they're almost done. Let the cookies cool off completely, and we'll start by doing the lemon glazed ones. And in order to make the glaze, you'll start with 1/2 cup of icing sugar and simply add enough of the lemon juice to make a thin paste. Stir it together and then continue to add lemon juice until you get it thin enough to make a glaze. And once you have it almost there, you can thin it even further by adding a little bit of water without compromising the taste. It's a good idea to place your cookies on a wire rack, and then when you drizzle the glaze over the top, you can just let it run right over the edge and drip down underneath. Make sure that your glaze is thin enough that it can be just a film over the top and not too thick. You don't want it to be like a frosting, and you want to be able to see the marks that you've put in the top of the cookie. So just because we want it that thin, I wanted to make sure that I brushed a little bit of the excess off by using a pastry brush. These are a nice biscuit-like cookie that's great with a cup of tea. Now the next cookies we're going to make will be the marshmallow filled ones. So for this one, we'll add some marshmallow fluff on the middle of each cookie. We'll spread it out slightly, but leave the largest amount in the middle. Next, take some chocolate chips and melt them in the microwave. I use half milk chocolate and half semi-sweet chocolate chips. When melting chocolate, you want to make sure that you don't overdo it. So check it frequently and stir it, and only melt it until it starts to melt, and stir it until it melts completely. So check it every 15 seconds, stir it, and if it needs a little bit more, another few seconds. And then stir it the rest of the way to melt once you've removed it from the microwave. And then you just pour it over the top of each cookie like this, and then once again, you're going to let it run down over the edge. Using a spoon, I smooth it over the edge of the cookie. This is where having it on a wire rack really helps as well, because if it drips, it just drips down underneath the wire rack and the cookie remains completely coated. It's important to work quickly though before your chocolate starts to set. If it sticks a little bit, you can go underneath and push up on it, and then it comes off the wire rack easier. Place your cookies in a cool spot to set. Now on to making the peanut butter filled ones. Start by placing half a cup of peanut butter in a small mixing bowl. Add half a cup of icing sugar, equal amounts, but only about a quarter of a cup of heavy cream. Then use your spoon and mix that together until it's smooth and creamy. Now place spoonfuls of this peanut butter mixture onto the middle of each cookie. I simply made a batch of sugar cookies, and I dedicated some cookies to each type out of the same batch. So you might have a little bit of the filling left over depending on how many cookies you wanted of each. And once again, I use a spoon to spread it out just a little bit, but leave the bulk of the filling in the middle of the cookie. Now for this one, I'm using a cup of melted milk chocolate chips. I find that milk chocolate is a little harder to work with than the semi-sweet chocolate, so you have to work a little bit quicker because it tends to thicken up faster. So that's just a little FYI. If it does thicken up a little bit too much on you, you can place it back in the microwave for just a few seconds. I do find the wire rack very helpful for these type of things, but if you don't have one, it's okay. You can just do it straight on a parchment paper on a cookie sheet. And it is a little bit of a messy proposition, but these cookies are well worth it. And you might have to use a knife to run along the edge of it to make sure that the cookies have been coated enough. Make sure that you keep them in a cool spot. I kept some of mine in the fridge, and that worked out quite well. They also freeze very well. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you give it a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. And until next time, happy eating.